Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog, I've shown you why families of critically ill patients in intensive care need to aim higher. You can read, watch or listen to last week's update by clicking on the link below this video. In this week's blog, I want to share with you the 4 deadly sins that families of critically ill patients in intensive care constantly make, but they are unaware of. It's very easy to get bogged down. It's very easy to be drowning in sorrow and negativity if your loved one has been admitted to intensive care for critical illness. After all, this often once-in-a-lifetime experience is most likely one of the biggest challenges that you, your family and your critically ill loved one will encounter in your lifetime. The discomfort you, your family and your critically ill loved one are facing is the discomfort that throws you out of your comfort zone immediately, and you and your family are faced with your worst nightmares that can manifest itself in the form of fear, frustration, discomfort, vulnerability, death, disability and the loss of control. And if you are, like 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, you let things happen to you, even though you realize that other people are running the show. You and your family have realized by now that the intensive care team is holding all the perceived power and they are calling the shots. And if you continue to be like 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, you have no idea how to have peace of mind, control, power and influence during this stressful, demanding, challenging and frustrating experience whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You see, in more than 15 years intensive care nursing experience in 3 different countries, and after working with thousands of critically ill patients and their families, I have seen over and over again that families of critically ill patients in intensive care commit 4 deadly sins over and over again, and it leaves them without peace of mind, without power, without control and without influence during a time where your family and your critically ill loved one need you the most. You are in a unique and once-in-a-lifetime situation where you, your family and your critically ill loved one can't afford to be dependent or at the mercy of other people, especially since there is so much at stake. What's at stake is your critically ill loved one's health and their life, your and your family's mental and physical well-being, and what's also at stake are the interests of the intensive care team. With those high stakes in mind, I want to show you the 4 deadly sins that families of critically ill patients in intensive care constantly make, but they are unaware of. Let's dive right into it. Number 1. Families of critically ill patients are paralyzed by fear. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care are paralyzed by fear, and they are therefore unable to make any sense out of this challenging situation, let alone have peace of mind, control, power or influence. They don't even know that peace of mind, control, power and influence are a possibility in this challenging situation. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care tend to be so focused on what the intensive care team has to say that they totally forget that they should have an opinion about the situation as well. The big problem here is that they are generally so frustrated by the whole situation that they don't even contemplate to do their own research. That's a big challenge and it's a big mistake. In order for you and your family to look at the situation differently, and in order for you and your family to stop being paralyzed by fear, you need to start looking at the situation differently, and you and your family need to start doing what other families in intensive care are not doing. As I have hinted towards before, 99% of families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't question, they don't believe that they can have peace of mind, control, power and influence, and they also haven't even contemplated that the intensive care team, generally speaking, has other interests that often go way beyond your critically ill loved one's prognosis and diagnosis. Therefore, your job is to become aware that you and your family are paralyzed by fear, and your job is to tackle your fear, look it in the eye and say, yes, I can handle this challenge, yes, I can start proactively managing the situation and the intensive care team, and I can get the outcome that I want. Do that and you have separated yourself from the rest of the 99% of families who don't have peace of mind, control, power and influence. And I bet the intensive care team will notice, because they are generally so used to dealing with families that are paralyzed by fear, and those families are handing over their power to the intensive care team on a platter, doing themselves and their critically ill loved one a massive disservice and doing the intensive care team a massive favor. Let's move on to number 2. Deadly sin number 2. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care are intimidated by the intensive care team. This one is one of my favorite topics, and I get frustrated, if not angry, when I start talking about it. Once again, you and your family are playing a high-stakes game, and I have seen the intensive care team winning the game over and over again because families of critically ill patients in intensive care are not prepared, and worst of all, they are intimidated by the intensive care team. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care think that the intensive care team must be smart. After all, they are highly skilled professionals and they have attended university, so they must have all the answers. Your job is to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team, because the reality is, if you don't, the intensive care team will keep the upper hand and keep you and your family at arm's length, so to speak. This is especially important for you and for your family if your critically ill loved one is in one of the following situations where they are either very unstable and in a very critical condition, or if they are in a life-threatening situation, or if they are in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, or if they are even approaching their end of life in intensive care. If your critically ill loved one is in one of those situations, and if you are consciously or unconsciously intimidated by the intensive care team, and if you don't know how the intensive care team is making decisions in those situations, you and your family will never have peace of mind, control, power and influence. Your job therefore is to stop being intimidated by the perceived power of the intensive care team. And your job is simply to stop acting submissive towards the intensive care team, start acting with confidence and assume that you can have peace of mind, control, power and influence. Do that and I bet that the intensive care team will notice, and I bet if you do only that, the dynamics will change in your favor. Deadly sin number 3. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care are not asking the right questions. If I had $1 for every family in intensive care who is afraid to ask the right and also often uncomfortable questions about their critically ill loved one's situation, and if I had $1 for every family in intensive care who is afraid to confront the intensive care team about their decisions, especially when their critically ill loved one is very unstable and very critical, or is in a life-threatening situation, or is in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, or is approaching the end of life in intensive care, I certainly would be a millionaire. However, your ability to ask the right questions will directly determine your and your family's level of peace of mind, control, power and influence. Think about the situations that I mentioned before, and you will realize that you and your family can't afford not to ask the right questions. The good news is that if you are reading or watching this right now, you and your family have come to the right place, because you are right on your way to get the recipe for asking the right questions. How important do you think it would be to ask the right and succinct questions if your critically ill loved one is in one of the situations that I have mentioned before? Let's come to number 4 and our last deadly sin. Families of critically ill patients in intensive care are not looking behind the scenes. This is the deadliest sin out of all sins, and I can't stress enough the importance of you knowing and understanding what's happening behind the scenes in intensive care. In more than 15 years of intensive care nursing in 3 different countries, I've had the insights to know and understand how the intensive care team will sell different situations to you and to your family so that they can continue driving their agenda. For example, some suggestions about withdrawal of treatment or about limitation of treatment for your critically ill loved one by the intensive care team may directly come from the intensive care team's interest in admitting other admissions into intensive care and freeing up the bed that your critically ill loved one is currently occupying. On the other hand, if your loved one is in a real end-of-life situation, the intensive care team may suggest to you and to your family to continue treatment, even though the intensive care team is unnecessarily prolonging your loved one's suffering, because the intensive care team may want to continue doing medical research, or the intensive care team wants to continue earning money. The bottom line is that most decisions in intensive care are made behind the scenes, and if you and your family don't educate yourself quickly, and if you're not looking behind the scenes in intensive care, the intensive care team will continue driving the bus without you even knowing which direction it's going. So, after all of that, how can you have peace of mind, control, power and influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You get to all that to the all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free reports, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. Discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How you can eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care, and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section where we answer your questions, or simply send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.